All right, and now for the main event. How will complex numbers be used on the ACTs? Now, when we look at this problem, we see what is the product of 3 plus I and 2 minus 2I. And when you see that product, you should immediately think, multiplication. So what it's really asking is 3 plus I multiplied by 2 minus 2I. And when you see this, you immediately think of the FOIL method. So 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times negative 2I is minus 6I. I times 2 is plus 2I. And then I times negative 2I is minus 2I squared. So then we have the 6. And then we have minus 6I plus 2I, which is minus 4I. All right, and then we're left with minus 2I squared at the end. And remember what we said before? That I squared is the same thing as negative 1. We get 6 minus 4I minus 2 times negative 1. And then we have 6 minus 4I, and then minus 2 times negative 1. This gets reduced to plus 2. And so we have 8 minus 4I. And we look, and lo and behold, there's an answer, and it is C. And now let's try this problem. Express the equation 2I divided by 1 minus I in the standard form A plus BI. And we know that A plus BI, that's the form of a complex number. And what it's really asking is like, well, how would you simplify 2I divided by 1 minus I? And so we look at this and we think, well, what we know is that if we need to get rid of an I in the denominator, we have to multiply the numerator and denominator by that denominator's conjugate. And what's the conjugate of 1 minus I? Well, it's 1 plus I. So we multiply the numerator and denominator by 1 plus I. And we know we can do this because this whole thing equals 1. So we're not changing anything in the any specific values. All right, so let's solve this. So 2I times 1 equals 2I. 2I times I is plus 2I squared divided by, and let's do the denominator, 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times I is plus I. Negative I times 1 is minus I, and that's the beauty of multiplying by the conjugate because we cancel out those i's. This turns into 0. And then negative I times I is negative I squared. So let's simplify this, and we get 2I plus 2I squared divided by 1 plus 0 minus I squared. And we know that I squared is the same thing as negative 1. So let's plug that in, and we get 2I plus 2 times negative 1, all divided by 1 minus negative 1. And then we get equals 2I minus 2, all divided by 1 plus 1, which equals 2. And then if we want to put it in the form of a complex number, which is A plus BI, let's divide this and this by the denominator. So we get 2I divided by 2 minus 2 divided by 2. And that simplifies even more. The 2's cancel out. And you have I minus, and those 2 cancels out. And you got I minus 1. Or if it was a form of expression of A plus BI, that A equals negative 1 and that B it just equals 1. So this would equal minus 1 plus I. Right? Because that I right there and that negative 1 is right there. Alright, so negative 1 plus I, whoops, and that's B. Sound good?